My mother-in-law was laughing so hard she had to wipe tears from her eyes when I told her I'd just bought a house. She thought I was joking. She kept saying, "Oh, sweetie, on your salary?" And then my father-in-law joined in, and then my husband, and the three of them sat there in my living room. My living room? The one I'd been paying for alone? Laughing at me like I was the funniest thing they'd seen all year. They stopped laughing about 45 seconds later, but I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Paige. I'm 31 years old. I work as a hospital billing coordinator, which is not a glamorous job, but it pays steadily and I've been doing it for 8 years. Which means I've had 8 years of watching every dollar carefully. I grew up watching my mom do the same thing. She raised me and my younger brother on one income after my dad left when I was 9, so I learned early that money is something you protect, not something you show off. I tell you this because it matters later. I met my husband at a friend's going-away party when I was 27. He was funny and easy to talk to, and he remembered my name the next day, which honestly set him apart from most people at that party. We dated for almost 2 years before he proposed. I thought I knew him. I really did. His parents lived about 20 minutes away. When we first started dating, they were wonderful. His mother made Sunday dinners and always set a plate for me. His father would ask about my week and actually listen to the answer. I remember driving home one night and thinking I finally have a real family. I had grown up with so little of that. I held on to that feeling like it was something fragile and precious. I should have paid closer attention to what it cost me to keep holding it. We got married in September. Small ceremony, outdoor venue. The kind of thing that sounds romantic on paper and mostly is, except for the part where my mother-in-law pulled me aside right before the reception and said, "Now that you're family, we expect you to act like it." I smiled because I didn't know what else to do. I assumed she meant something warm by it. She did not mean something warm by it. The first month was fine. The second month, they started coming over without calling. Not occasionally, regularly, almost every other day, always right around the time I got home from work. I'd walk in the door still wearing my badge and my mother-in-law would be sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee she'd made from my coffee, looking at me like I was the guest. My father-in-law would have the TV on at full volume. My husband would be in the shower or on his phone and not register any of this as unusual. I didn't say anything the first few times. I told myself it was an adjustment period, that blended families take time, that I should be grateful they wanted to be close. By month 3, they were asking for money, not large amounts at first, 100 here, 50 there. The car needs an oil change and we're a little short this week. Could you spot us for groceries? We get paid Friday. My husband would look at me with this expression that I can only describe as expectant, like of course I would say yes, like that was just what you did. And I said yes, because I wanted to keep the peace, because I thought it was temporary, because I was raised to be agreeable and I hadn't yet learned what that cost. Then it stopped being small amounts. One evening I came home to find all 3 of them sitting together at the dining table with an actual printed spreadsheet. My mother-in-law had made a list, a literal typed, printed, formatted list of what she described as monthly household contributions that she felt I should be making to help support them. It included their mortgage, their car payment, a line item for what she called family entertainment. The total came to just under $1,900 a month. I stood there and read that spreadsheet 3 times. I kept thinking I was misunderstanding something. You know what my husband said? He said, "I know it looks like a lot, but they did so much for me growing up. This is just how family works." That night, I lay awake for a very long time. Not crying. I was past the point of crying about it. I was thinking. I was adding things up. My husband's contribution to our household, which he had been slowly decreasing for months. The overtime he claimed to be working that never seemed to produce additional income. The way his parents always seemed to show up freshly from somewhere fun, tan, in a good mood, full of stories about a casino 3 towns over. I started paying attention differently after that. I didn't say anything right away. I want to be honest about this because I know people will ask, I know the question is always, why didn't you just leave? Why did you stay? And the answer is complicated in ways that are hard to explain cleanly. Part of it was that I still loved who I thought he was. Part of it was that I had built so much of my sense of safety around this idea of finally having a family that I wasn't ready to dismantle it. Part of it was fear. And part of it was that I was already quietly doing something about it and I needed more time. What I was doing was this. I had started talking to a real estate attorney. About 6 months before I got married, I had inherited a modest sum from my grandmother. Not life-changing money, but significant. I had kept it in a separate account my whole marriage, untouched, because something in me had always said, keep this separate, keep this yours. Call it instinct. Call it my mother's voice in my head. I don't know. But I had it, and I had been adding to it quietly for 2 years, and now I was having very calm, very careful conversations with an attorney about what I could do with it. Meanwhile, things at home were getting worse. My mother-in-law had started making comments about my appearance at every visit. You look tired, Paige. Is that what you're wearing? She would say things about how I kept the house, about my cooking, about the way I folded towels. She said them in this light, amused voice, like she was simply offering helpful observations. And then if I reacted, she would act wounded. I'm just trying to help you. I don't know why you're so sensitive. My father-in-law would grunt in agreement from the couch without looking up. My husband started coming home later and later. When I mentioned it, he said work was demanding. I asked him once, gently, if we could limit his parents' visits to weekends just to give us some space during the week. He looked at me like I had suggested something obscene. They're my parents, Paige. I'm not going to tell my parents they can't see their son. I said, I'm asking for 2 evenings a week where it's just us. He said, you're being selfish. I wrote that down. I had a notebook by then. I wrote down dates and times and what was said. My attorney had suggested it. I thought she was being overly cautious. She was not. About 3 months before everything came to a head, I was in the kitchen doing dishes when I heard the 3 of them in the living room. My husband had apparently thought I'd gone upstairs. His voice was different. Looser, like he forgot to keep the performance up. He was telling his parents about a woman he'd met through a work thing. He wasn't being subtle. His mother laughed in that particular way she had, approving and conspiratorial. His father said, just don't do anything stupid until the timing is right. I stood very still with my hands in the dishwater. I'm not going to tell you I didn't feel anything because that would be a lie. I felt something enormous move through me and then go quiet. Like a door closing. I finished the dishes. I dried my hands. I went upstairs and I called my attorney and left a message. After that, I was very calm. I was calm in a way that probably should have worried someone, but nobody was paying close enough attention to notice. I went to work. I came home. I made dinners. I smiled at appropriate moments. I was documenting everything. I had my attorney. I had my notebook. I had the account my mother-in-law didn't know existed. I had a voice recorder app on my phone that I started leaving running on the kitchen counter. 2 weeks before I moved out, I went and signed the papers on a townhouse. It was in a newer development about 8 miles away. 2 bedrooms. Good natural light, a small fenced yard. It was in my name only. I paid for it with the money I had been holding since before any of this started. The down payment cleared on a Tuesday afternoon and I sat in the parking lot of my attorney's office and just breathed for a while. I didn't tell my husband, I didn't tell anyone. The night I decided to let them know. They were all 3 in the living room again. My mother-in-law with her usual glass of wine. My father-in-law watching something at maximum volume. My husband on his phone with that particular private smile he had started wearing. I came in and stood in the doorway and waited until my mother-in-law looked up. I said, I just want to let you know I'll be moving out at the end of the month. The room went extremely quiet. My mother-in-law set down her wine glass. She looked at me, then at my husband, then back at me. She said, moving out. Moving where? I said I'd bought a place. She blinked. Bought. Yes. There was a pause, and then she started laughing. That particular laugh she had, high and dismissive, the one that said you couldn't possibly. My father-in-law joined in after a second. My husband looked uncomfortable, but he didn't say anything. Bought a place, my mother-in-law said, still laughing. On a hospital billing salary? Paige, sweetheart, do you know what real estate costs? I told her it was a townhouse in the new development near the highway. I told her it was in my name. I told her the down payment was already cleared. The laughing stopped. My husband sat up. What new development? I named it. I watched his expression go through several phases very quickly. His mother said, well, this is obviously still a marital home. You understand that, right? Whatever you purchased during the marriage is joint property. I looked at her for a moment. I said the funds used for the purchase were mine before the marriage. Separate property. My attorney's already confirmed it. She opened her mouth. Closed it. My husband stood up. He had his reasonable voice on, the one he used when he was trying to reset a situation. Paige, I think we should talk about this privately. Whatever's going on between us, we don't need to involve property decisions. I said, there's nothing to discuss. I'm moving out. The lease on this apartment is in your name, so you and your parents can continue here. I'd suggest you review the terms, though. My mother-in-law's voice changed. The warmth evaporated completely, and what replaced it was something I recognized from the early days, that same tone she'd used when she said, now that you're family, we expect you to act like it. She said, you don't get to just walk out of this family after everything we've done for you, after we welcomed you in. You don't have anywhere else to go, Paige. You have no family. That landed because she knew exactly where to aim it. I let it sit for a second. Then I said, actually, my mom is moving in with me. She's coming up from Florida next weekend. She's very excited about the yard. Something shifted in the room. My mother-in-law looked like she was recalibrating. My father-in-law said, you can't just take assets out of a marriage. I said, I'd invite you to discuss that with my attorney. Her contact information is in the papers you'll be receiving. I paused. Also, and I want to be gentle about this, you should know that I've been recording conversations in this house for the past 2 months. Not secretly. I disclosed it to my attorney. Virginia is a one-party consent state. Silence. The recording from 6 weeks ago, I continued, where you discussed the timeline for my husband's next relationship, and the phrase, wait until the timing is right, appears, that one is particularly relevant to my attorney's work on the infidelity claim. My husband sat back down. Slowly. His mother said, very quietly, that's private. I know, I said. It felt that way when I heard it too. I left the room. I went upstairs, I finished packing the last of the boxes I'd been quietly preparing for weeks, and I loaded them into my car. My husband came to the doorway of the bedroom once and looked at the half-empty closet and didn't say anything. His parents didn't follow me upstairs. By the time I carried the last box down, the living room was quiet in a different way than it usually was. I said goodnight. I meant it to be civil. I even mostly felt it. I drove to my new place and walked through the empty rooms and stood at the back window for a while looking at the yard. It was 10:30 at night and very quiet. I called my mom. She answered on the second ring like she always does. She said, how did it go? I said, it went. She laughed a little, the way she does. I'm coming Saturday. I'm bringing that fig tree I told you about. I said that was perfect. Here's what happened in the months after. The infidelity claim went forward. It was not contested the way my husband expected, partly because the evidence was substantial and partly because he had been far less discreet than he thought. The asset division worked out the way my attorney predicted. Because the townhouse was funded with documented separate property, it stayed mine. We settled without going to court. My in-laws had to move out of the apartment 3 months after I left. My husband, it turned out, had not been managing the rent. I learned later they had moved in with his aunt. My mother came on a Saturday in early spring with her fig tree and 2 suitcases and a box of things from my childhood she'd been storing. We set up the back bedroom together. We ate dinner at the kitchen table with the window open. She made her particular coffee the next morning, the kind she's made my whole life, and we sat on the back porch in the early light and didn't talk much and didn't need to. I have thought about this a lot, about what I would tell someone who is standing where I was standing 3 years ago, still trying to keep something alive that was already gone. I think I would say the most dangerous thing about a performance is that it can look so much like the real thing. And the most important thing I learned is that I had been saving, quietly and carefully, since long before I had any idea I would need to. My grandmother's money. My own money. The notebook. All of it. Nobody gave me that instinct. I had always had it. I just hadn't trusted it yet. I trust it now. I trust it a great deal. My mom's fig tree is doing well. She says it's going to fruit next summer. We're already planning what to do with it. I've thought about what actually happened to my in-laws and my husband, not in a bitter way, just clearly. They made a series of choices, each one small enough to seem manageable, and those choices accumulated into a life that eventually collapsed under its own weight. My mother-in-law chose to treat kindness as a performance. My husband chose to protect his comfort over his integrity. My father-in-law chose to go along with all of it because it cost him nothing at the time. And for a while, it worked for them. That's the part people don't say out loud enough, that manipulation often works, for a long time, on people who are trying hard to be good. I was trying hard to be good. That's exactly why it worked on me. But here's the thing about choices. They don't disappear. They just wait. the money my husband funneled toward casinos was money that didn't go toward rent, which is why the apartment fell apart the moment I stopped covering the gap. The cruelty my mother-in-law directed at me was heard by neighbors, recorded in my phone, noted in my notebook. It didn't vanish just because she delivered it with a smile. My father-in-law's silence in the face of everything made him just as responsible. Every action they took had a consequence they didn't see coming because they weren't paying attention to consequences. They were only paying attention to what they could get next. I think about my own choices too, because that's the honest version of this story. I stayed longer than I should have. I gave more than was reasonable. I said yes when I should have said no, not because I was stupid, but because I was raised to hold on, to be patient, to give people the benefit of the doubt. Those are not bad qualities. They just need a limit. What I had to learn, slowly, the hard way, was that being generous is only a virtue when it's freely given. The moment someone starts counting on your generosity as a resource they're entitled to, something has changed, and you have to be willing to see it. Paige, and I mean me, speaking about myself, had to learn to trust what she already knew. I knew something was wrong the first month. I knew it when my mother-in-law made her first cutting remark. I knew it the night my husband suggested I take out loans in my name to fund his parents' lifestyle. I knew it, and I talked myself out of knowing it over and over because I wanted so badly to be wrong. The notebook, the attorney, the separate account, none of that was revenge. It was just finally listening to myself. What I'd say to anyone standing in a version of that kitchen, watching a spreadsheet get pushed across the table toward them, the instinct that is telling you something is wrong is not being dramatic. It is not being selfish. It is intelligence doing its job. Protecting yourself is not the opposite of being a good person. It is what a good person does. You can be kind and clear-eyed at the same time. You can be loving and have a boundary at the same time. Those things are not in conflict. My mom's fig tree is going to fruit next summer. That's where I am now. That's what I traded all of it for, and I'd do it again without hesitating.